Hey guys, how you doing? This is jpsarrireviews coming to you once again with another episode of Age of Heroes, my podcast. Welcome to the podcast. And today I want to celebrate Mexico. I want to celebrate Mexico. So many of you know I am, Mexican American. But my childhood, I was born in Mexico. My childhood was spent in Mexico. Half of my life I spent in Mexico, and the other half here in the U.S. I love my home. I love the U.S. I'm very patriotic. I love the United States. I consider this my home. This is the place that, received me as an immigrant when I came to this country and with open arms, and always going to honor this country. But I cannot forget my roots. I cannot forget where I come from. And it's important to always know, because sometimes, particularly in this time and age, where the political lines are pretty much set on the sand, and people are making their own conclusions about the world, and they're taking a stand or taking a side. It's important to know exactly the difference. It's important to know and that at the end of the day, nations are just the names we put ourselves, with the classification we add to our names, to ourselves, based on color, based on language, based on the place we live, based on some cultural background. But at the end of the day, we are human. We all are, and we all share the same place. We live in the same neighborhood, which is Earth, which is this planet, and we all are neighbors. And we have so much in common that we have to share that. And I want to share that today here because, I'm proud to be Mexican. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to share both. I grew up in Mexico. My childhood was spent mostly in Mexico. My father is Mexican. My mother is Honduran. She's from Central America. My grandfather's from El Salvador. We come from a long line of immigrants. In my blood, there's Jewish. There is also Arabs, Lebanese. There are Basque. That's where my last name come from. So we're just a mixing of so many stuff, so many places in the world, and we all can count that. And America's a melting pot, and we part of that melting pot. My wife is Puerto Rican, born in the U.S., but family from Puerto Rico. She also has Jewish roots, Arab roots, Spanish roots. So we all have a lot in common, and we all share that. We make this who we are as human beings. But being Mexican, it's one of the things that I'm so proud of. Even though in this time and age, it seems that being Mexican is being downsided by a lot of people, particularly by racist mindsets and people that tend to denigrate Mexicans. You see all the time on the comments. Every time you mention something about Mexico, somebody has to mention politics, has to pick Trump into the picture. Like that's like something that will change the course of history. Like the Mexicans are the people to blame, and of course all the rhetoric that we heard about Mexicans being rapists and being the worst of the worst, which it's an insult. And that's one of the reasons why I definitely never really liked Trump from the get-go. And I'm gonna be honest with you here. I'm not trying to be political, but I'm gonna tell you why. Because I am Mexican. I am an immigrant in the U.S. and I have made a life in the U.S. and I have never taken advantage of people. I made my own wealth based on my work, and I love and respect the laws of this country. And like me, there's millions and millions of Mexicans living in the U.S. that can share the same story. So this is the thing. People that do not know are going to emphasize certain things, and mainly because they're frustrated with their own personal lives and their own personal decisions. So they try to find someone to blame, because they're never to blame. If you haven't really taken opportunities in this country to be better, then it's not on the people right next to you. It's on you. We all have to take that ownership. Yes, there is also division. There's also racism. There's also other things that limit some people and some ethnicities. Yes, there is. And we cannot just say that, be blinded about it. But the truth of the matter is that this is a country of great opportunities, and anyone can really take them. You have to work hard at it, perhaps more than others, but the opportunity is there for all of us. But today I want to celebrate Mexico. I don't want to talk about anything else. Just I want to celebrate Mexico, because to me, when I think about Mexico, particularly, this is the patriotic month. This is el mes patrio. That's how it's known in Spanish in Mexico. This is the month that we celebrate independence. Independence started back in 1810. That's when el grito de Dolores, or el grito de independencia, which is the cry of Dolores, or the cry of independence. That was done 1810. Started in the town of Dolores in Hidalgo, and the state of Hidalgo, and it went on. Pretty much it went on for quite some time. It lasted more than a decade, if I'm not mistaken, until 1821. Yeah, 1821. That's when the independence was finalized, when the war was finalized. Spaniards in control, and of course a lot of the people that were from the land, Indians, and people that were native. But also you have a new generation of people during that time, people that they were pretty much mestizos. That's the name. They're people that they were Spaniard, from their parents were Spaniard, but they were born in Mexico. And sometimes there was this mestizaje where there were Spaniards, intermarrying with natives and stuff like that. So they had this new generation of Mexicans that they were so dissatisfied with the taxing system that exists, that the control of Spain, they had to pay tribute to Spain. Technically, the same independence that happened to the U.S., the same mindset. There's this new generation of people that didn't saw themselves as British, talking about America. They saw themselves as Americans, people from the new colonies. The same happens with Mexico. These people were dissatisfied because they didn't saw themselves as the Spaniards. They saw themselves as Mexicanos. They saw themselves as Mexicans. They saw themselves as part of La Nueva España, the new Spain. They were part of this new land, and they felt that there was a lot of unfair treatment. So that really prompted the independence. And Mexico has always had a history of wars and internal wars. That's something that happens in the first century of Mexican history. It was really heavy until technically the Revolution War. There was the pretty much the wars in between, but also the revolution that happened in the early 1900s. And that really was the last war of Mexico. And then, of course, the progress started after the war. Mexico was devastated. There was a lot of problems. Mexico has lost by then, big part of the country to the U.S., with the loss of Texas land, the loss of California, New Mexico, Arizona, places that to this day, if you have never been in the U.S., and, if I'm talking to the people who have never been here, if you go to those places, you can see the big influence of Mexican culture, of Spanish culture, but mainly Mexican culture. You guys see all over the place. Being in parts of Texas, parts of parts of California, it's like you in Mexico. Definitely like the culture, the vibe, the names of the towns, the name of the city, in this case the streets, the architecture. There's a big influence, and Mexico has always been a big part of our culture. Part of American culture, and it's back and forth, because even though in Mexico we have our own particular culture, we share so much with the U.S. and we admire so much of the American culture. You're not gonna hear this nowadays because everybody tries to take a lot of patriotic views, and they say nationalistic views more than patriotic, and they say, well, we are better than this or better than that, we're better than Mexicans, and in Mexico say we're better than Americans. But at the end of the day, I remember growing up, we admire, many of my kids, or the kids that we grew up, we admire American pop culture. We admire American culture. We watch American movies in black and white. We enjoy the all classic westerns. It's always nice. Of course, Mexicans were always portrayed as this, dirty people, that in the back road, the back roads, or in the middle of the nowhere, people that they mischievous and alcoholics and all that kind of stuff. But that was just the portrayer of that. Not the reality of it, but we enjoy watching those films. Of course, comic books have always been a big part of Mexican culture. We love the superhero stories. We also created our own heroes. Growing up, I remember we read a lot of stories of the luchadores. And luchadores, they have their own, little comic books. They have the books that you can find, and El Santo, Blue Demon. You have so many different ones back in when I was growing up. We enjoy that, and we integrated that part into it. Caliman, that's another comic book very famous. So many. We enjoy American culture, and by movies, of course, and music. Music was a big part of it. There was a big influence of rock and roll when it came out, so that was part of the culture also in Mexico. We always were fascinated by American sports. Growing up, as a kid, I played soccer like most kids, football, as it's known in Mexico. I play football like so much, and as a kid, if you're in elementary school, you're a little kid, you play football. That's just bottom line. But once you're getting older, when I was getting into middle school, La Secundaria and all that stuff. But prior to go to La Secundaria, which is middle school in Mexico, I was already playing basketball. I'm not the tallest person in the world. I'm not really that tall, but I play basketball. We enjoy like many kids, and I really enjoy. And I remember those days back in the 90s or early 90s or in the 80s. There were teams that people love. In the 80s, I remember like my favorite team was the Celtics, the Boston Celtics for some reason. I enjoy the Boston Celtics, and then of course the Chicago Bulls with in this case Michael Jordan. He was pretty much the hero of everyone. But there were at the time, people loved, the Phoenix Suns, and they have friends that they love. In this case, Magic Johnson, of course. People love the LA. You're part of the Lakers, or you're a fan of the other like Orlando Magic, and of course with Shaq. So there were times where people were in love with all of these things, and it was part of the culture. And of course, when I get really into between middle school and then high school, then I started playing football. And I really love American football. My team was, I love football since I was a kid. I watched a lot of football. Joe Montana was a hero to me. And I play, American football, and I still enjoy it. And then during that time in the 90s, I started developing a likeness for the Broncos, the Denver Broncos. It was actually my second team after the 49ers. But, even as a kid, we enjoy baseball. We watch a lot of baseball. The Dodgers was my favorite team. Fernando Valenzuela was playing that back then, so he was a hero for a lot of Mexicans. So, Mexican culture has always been fascinated by American culture. Mexicans have been fascinated by it. But that can be said also the same about Americans being fascinated by Mexican culture. It's in the food. People love Mexican food, or the variations that we have here in the U.S. of Mexican food. Not technically original Mexican food, but the variations. Americans love Mexican food. They love going to Mexico. They love the Mexican resorts. They love to go there. It's like the backyard of the U.S. People love to go to those places. They love how friendly people are in Mexico. They love to, vacation over there. You can see that nowadays on YouTube. So many people like travel channels, people that live in Mexico. A lot of Americans live in Mexico, and they share their experiences. There are good channels. I enjoy those channels because it brings good memories of Mexico, and also the progress of Mexico and how Mexico is, total different image of what you are presented in the media and Fox News or even CNN. MSNBC. You don't get those images there, and you don't get that image of Mexico. You're always going to get the news what really sells, which is somebody got killed, somebody got shot, people, the cartels and all that kind of stuff. It's all you're ever going to see that. You're never going to see the good side. But Mexico, it's always been a country full of culture and full of color, and it has provided some of the greatest and most fascinating great artists of this generation, of pretty much of generations, but modern times. They see that influence in nowadays. For example, you see that in the directors. That you have many great filmmakers. They're making a name in Hollywood and around the world. You have people like Alfonso Cuarón, who did Roma. He won last year, nominated, and I think won some of the Oscars. Alfonso Cuarón, fantastic director. I love Roma. It's just a beautiful movie, like the way he shot it. You had González Iñárritu, you had Guillermo del Toro, you had people like actors like Gael García Bernal, who also is a director, Diego Luna, who is making big strides, people like Lubeski. Luis Buñuel was a famous director for many years. He was born in Spain, but he was Mexican. He naturalized Mexican, and he lived in Mexico. That's where he made his career. But you had so many, Alfonso Arau, you had so many great directors, great cinematographers, actresses like Salma Hayek. Actually, I can tell you one thing. This is a funny note. Not a funny note. This is just a fact. I went to school. I was born in Coatzacoalcos, Veracruz, which is actually the town where Salma Hayek was born. So her family are a very important family in this city. It's a beautiful city in the Gulf of Mexico in the state of Veracruz, and they're from there. They're Lebanese descent, but they're from there. And this family, I went to school with many of her cousins. I know a lot of them, their family in school. I went to school with them. Very important people. Very financially successful. They have their own businesses. They are really hard workers. Really nice people. In this case, this country is a country full of people with so much talent. Even in the arts today, we have a lot of great artists that come from Mexico. They still work in the art and comic book industry. Great sculptors, like in this case, Eric Sosa. I have talked about Eric Sosa for so long in my channel. I've reviewed many of his statues. This one in the beginning of this channel. And I've always talked about Eric Sosa. A great friend, born in Mexico City, raised in the U.S., in California. But, he has so many roots back to Mexico. He has been in Mexico. He has been a missionary as a Mormon missionary in Mexico. So he is a person that loves Mexico. He is very Mexican in his ways. But he's such a talented artist. And he's just a name to name so many of people that are Mexican descent that definitely have really shaped and continue to shape Mexican culture and pretty much pop culture in general. I'm proud to be Mexicano. I'm proud to be what I am. I'm proud to be of those part of my life. That cannot be taken away. I love living in the U.S., but I love, going back to my roots and remember and enjoying it. So this month is special for Mexicans. Of course, everything started on the 15th, September 15th. That was Sunday night. It's called El Grito de Independencia. That's the cry for independence. It's always celebrated in every part of Mexico. If you have never been in Mexico, you should participate in one of these events. You go to the public plaza, which is always right next to the city hall, or the, in this case, the state capitol, offices. And normally the biggest one is in the Zócalo, which is the center of Mexico City. And there's the Palacio Nacional, which is the national palace. And that's where the president, goes out through the balcony. There's a balcony, and he's says the words of independence, which is kind of like, nobody really knows exactly what happened. I'm going to have some notes for anyone here on the description of people that want to know more about it. But he cries out the words of Hidalgo, who was the one that cried for independence, who was, in this case, a priest. But definitely nobody really knows because there was not really a detail. So it's just part of history. It has been done, I think, more traditionally. It's a tradition that has been done. And at the end of the speech, of course, he rings the bell in celebration of independence. That's the crowd for independence. There's fireworks. People are dressing up. One funny note in Mexico and different in the U.S. In the U.S., people pretty much can wear the flag every time, all year round. You can, have flags everywhere, American flags. But in Mexico, the only month that you can do this is in September. Every other month, it is prohibited to wear, even on your clothing, the Mexican flag, because it is respected, it's honored as a national symbol, and no one can really, fly it. There is so much history behind that flag. We've been through so many wars. Mexico has been so many wars, and fighting for independence. And even after invasions of France and the U.S., we were able to, Mexicans were able to overcome, they overcame. But definitely that's, there's so much, it is considered as a sacred symbol of national pride. So you cannot really wear it. So, but in September, you're going to see the Mexican flag everywhere. People are so proud of being Mexican. There's a lot of celebration. There's always food. Independence is kind of like an American, here in America, we celebrate 4th of July. And the 4th of July is like a whole day event. People go to the beach, go do like outdoor activities. People go out, they celebrate with their families, a family-oriented thing. There's fireworks, but you go to Mexico, the fireworks it has like a semi-formal aspect of independence in the 15. It's a big, like that, but there's an informal aspect, and a lot of families are involved. It's not like a lot of people confuse Cinco de Mayo, which Independence Day of Mexico. It's not. It's just, it's another event. That's the Batalla de Puebla. That's a battle that was won, Mexicans won against the French army. But that's not the most important event in Mexican history. It's not independence. But there's a big celebration. There's always food. There's a lot of dances. A lot of people. There's a lot of Mexican pride. People wearing national, like in this case, the customs, old customs. Like wearing the traditional, I would say clothing. Old clothing. Representing each state, because each state has their own particular clothing. So people celebrate. They eat their food. It's fun. And of course, in September 16, early in the morning, is the big parades. There's parades all over the country, but the biggest parade, there's even parades here in the U.S., Mexican parades. I think there's one in Chicago, but there is a parade in Los Angeles that has been there for years. I think over 60 some years, in East LA. But in Mexico City, there's a big military parade. It's a huge parade. It's a beautiful parade, actually. One of the most beautiful parades in the world, in my opinion. I've seen other parades, but definitely this is a big, big parade. Of course, last year and this year, there were a lot of people were having a hard time with the parade here in the U.S. with, because it's not a customary. But it's nothing wrong with parades. I I think it's part of the, the pride. It's taking pride of who you are. It's trying to, cement that pride of, national, and this is patriotic views more than nationalistic views. And Mexico has done it for generations. And I love parades. The military parade in Mexico City is the best. As a Mexican, that my views are really represented in the way I talk in this podcast and the way my videos are. I share my view, I share my childhood, and most of that has to do with living in Mexico and the way I am. So in this month, I invite you to know more about Mexico, not just from what people say in the news or what the news tell you, or what other people tell you, what people on Facebook that do not know anything about Mexico tell you. Experience it for yourself. You might not experience it by going to Mexico. You might not be able to afford to go to Mexico. But you can always know more about Mexico by YouTube. There's so many people sharing live. There's so many people sharing their videos where they share the experiences living in Mexico. And you know what? There's another way to know Mexico from a different side. It's not a documentary. There's people just walking, living a daily life, eating the Mexican food. So there's another way that you can share Mexico. The influence of Mexico is always in everything, even in video games. You can see that in games like, Red Dead Redemption, the original, which I enjoy that part of Mexico, in the history, like going to Mexico and fighting for revolution and all that stuff. It was nice, part of the game I'd really enjoy. But you got games like Guacamole, like things like that. There's more like platformers, but with a Mexican vibe, with luchadores, which is a big part of Mexico. But you also see movies like Coco and all those movies that really represent aspects of Mexican culture, and it's good, But movies like Roma and actors, in this case, not actors, directors, film directors that have created some of the greatest movies, like in this case, Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, who is a fascinating director. And all of that, they come from their Mexican school of filmmaking. And the great movies that represent Mexico. There are so many great movies at that. So I invite you to listen, to watch, to look for those documentaries. There's one documentary that I really enjoy on Netflix. That is the Taco Chronicles. Really fun because it really talks about the history of tacos, and in it really each episode is emphasized at the particular taco. Everything was filmed in Mexico, so they have everything is in Spanish, but they dub it. So definitely you have I don't think they dub it. They have I forgot the words, I don't remember the word right now, but they have the words and the credits and all that kind of stuff, so you can really read it and watch it. But it's fun because it really showcases and that side of Mexican culture, and tacos are a big part of it. The difference of tacos, real tacos, not the ones we hear sometimes in the US, are just kind of like not the real thing. So it's very good. You can watch it, definitely learn how to make some tacos perhaps. There's so many ways that you can learn, and really know the true Mexico. Not only the Mexico that is here in the U.S. at the Taco Tuesday or, the 2-for-1 margaritas or whatever. That is just part of Mexico, but it's not the real deal. It's not the real thing. And to really celebrate it, to watch some of the great movies, like as a kid, I watched some of those classic, black and white films from the golden age of Mexican filmmaking from, like in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. You got Jorge Negrete, you have all these great actors, comedians like Cantinflas, Tintin, all these great, I would say, movies of their era. Pedro Infante, all of them were fantastic. Maria Felix, all these are people that we love and we enjoy their films back in those days. Black and white, they're timeless films. And some of the best and most beautiful classic films that really cemented the quality of the new generation now of filmmakers because they learned from that school. It's just amazing. Enjoy that. If you have the opportunity this month, this week, for example, just celebrate it that way. Know more about Mexico, documentaries, there's a lot of things you can do. Get to know the real Mexico. You might not get to travel there, but you can experience it and learn more about it. And definitely that will open eyes to you to know more about the artists, about the art, and why is it that these people, we are as we are because we're very artistic. We are because it's part of our culture. We grew up around it. We grew up around art. But once again, my friends, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. And I want to say, before I let go, Viva Mexico. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.